Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining. I hope a lot of you enjoyed the documentary that just finished off, and we're so honored to be able to gather here today, a few of Dan's close friends, to just chat a little bit and reflect on the impact that he has had in our lives. Unfortunately, with everything going on with COVID-19 and all that's happening right now in the world, a lot of the celebrations of life for Dan have been postponed for now, and we definitely look forward to getting together once all of this craziness dies down to give this wonderful man such a proper send-off. But in the meantime, we decided to gather virtually and take this opportunity to gather some of his friends. So I have 4 panelists that are going to be joining us today to discuss and share some stories about Dan. All of them were a part of Dan's theater life, and especially in the early days of Dear Harvey. So I'm going to welcome all 4 of them to the stream, and then we'll go ahead and introduce everyone. So hello, everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today. Why don't we go around and just start with introductions? Go ahead, Patty. Why don't we just go around?
Yep. Hi, Patricia Lowry, playwright for Dear Harvey.
Excellent.
Are we all in the same place? Okay.
Sure.
I'm Thomas Hodges. I'm the composer for Dear Harvey.
Hi, everyone. Oh, sorry.
I'm Jerusha Matson-Neal, and I was one of the original performers in Dear Harvey.
Hi, everybody. Jay Sheehan here. I'm the production manager at San Diego State, and we produced the show in 2009, so 11 years ago.
Awesome. And I'm Mary Bauer Spector. I'm the founding artistic director of Breakthrough Workshop Theater, and I also have been in Dear Harvey a bunch of times and directed this film and put it all together. So we just came up with a few questions. As Patty mentions in the documentary, she talks about all of the intersecting circles of love that we've sort of discovered in the recent months since Dan's passing. And we kind of just wanted to open up this forum to share those stories and to intersect some of those circles. So the first question, and we'll start again with Patty on this one. When did you first meet Dan, and what was your first impression of him? And we'll have everyone do this question.
Oh, thanks, Ira. Before I share this, I just want to put out a huge thanks to Ira and Breakthrough Workshop Theater for what you did with this documentary. It just has a huge reach, and it really feeds my heart. And so thank you for your artistry. You know, I love that question. My first picture memory is that with Dan is standing next to a Xerox copier at Diversionary Theater. I don't know why we were standing there, but that's my first image of him. You know, and I think it's perfect because Dan was just always working. He was just always, okay, what can we do? What can we do? I was teaching at San Diego State. They had produced a play of mine. I still can't remember if Dan saw that play or not. If he did, he probably didn't like it, but he didn't say anything. It was a very sad play. And but someone that we knew in common, Dan was looking for someone to work in the literary office, and so I got referred to him that way. And so I started to work at Diversionary.
Who wants to go next?
I'll go next. It's fun. I was thinking about this, and I'm like, I have 2 memories, and I don't remember which one was first. But Patty, you were there for both of them, introducing me to Dan. I also have a memory at the Xerox machine at Diversionary, oddly enough. But I think the first time that I really remember talking with him and meeting him was backstage at SDSU of the Jungle Book, and he was just walking me. We were just walking and talking about music and musicals and creating, and my first impression was just what a kind human being and so supportive. And he barely knew me. So,
Jerusha?
Thank you. So one of the things, you know, Thomas, I really resonated with your comments in the show today about how there are these resonances between Harvey Milk's life and the way Dan lived his life. And one of the multiple ways that I saw that working is that Dan really went to places where there had been bruises or wounds in the community. He wasn't afraid. He was very brave to go in and do work in places where other people might be nervous about going. And one of those, partly because of, pains and difficulties he carried from his own past, was in relationships with communities of faith that had been really bigoted. And I was an ordained pastor, and I was interested in getting involved in theater. And I knew him first as a director. He was directing this play, Busy World is Hushed, and it was about an ordained woman, sort of scholar, and her relationship with her gay son. And I was reading for the role of this mom, and I remember coming back and wanting to be that kind of welcoming presence from the faith community that wanted Dan to know, I think, in our relationship, in the same way that, Harvey had said, what makes me the most mad are not the bigots, it's the religious sort of leaders that are silent about the bigots. Like I wanted him to know that I wanted to stand with him. But I'll tell you, I was really scared. I was really nervous. I didn't know how to be. I was new in this community. I was just humbled to even be invited in and asked to be a part of it. And also being in theater was new. I hadn't been in theater for many years. I was preaching in a pulpit on Sundays. This wasn't my water that I swam in. And what I will always remember is, as a director and then as a friend, him taking me under his wing, his making space for me to feel at home in a place that I had no business feeling at home, making me have a home at Diversionary. And his bravery in offering hospitality to me in that season, when we were both trying to feel our way, and how do we connect and how do we find language to trust each other, man, like that's been transformative for me in all kinds of venues there, further out. That, and during that show, he got in the habit of buying me chocolate truffles, which was wonderful. So.
Oh, that was beautiful. Hi, everybody. My memory of Dan, and I'm getting older, so my memory of years is a little fuzzy. But it was at San Diego State, not at a Xerox machine. And we were producing. It was either Lord Derby or it was a Daddy machine. I don't recall exactly which one it was. Patty might know better, but I was introduced to Dan. I was the production manager on the faculty there, and when I met Dan, it was this really tall, smiling, wonderful man that said hello. And the minute that I, hugged him, I think we hugged right there on the spot. It felt like such a connection, such a wonderful man that I felt that had entered my life, and I had no idea how much. It's interesting when you meet somebody and you think, oh, I wonder if we'll ever work together or do anything. And then several years later, this magical project happens. But I remember Dan, and his smile was infectious, and his hugs were great, and his smile was perfect. And I miss him very much.
Thanks, Jane. For me, I worked at the Bailiwick Repertory Theater in Chicago right out of undergrad, and that was at the time the LGBT theater there. And since it was then, and it is continues today to be such sort of a niche market, a lot of the different executive directors or artistic directors would communicate with each other in the marketing departments, and I was doing the marketing at Bailiwick, and Dan would call numerous times throughout the year. And so I sort of met him over the phone before I actually met him in person. And the following year, I applied to the MFA musical theater program at San Diego State. And I thought, well, if I'm going to move to San Diego or potentially move to San Diego for the school, I should check out Diversionary. And there's this guy who's just so friendly. He's so friendly on the phone. You could just feel that over the phone. And so I reached out to him and asked. I was only going for like in and out, like 28 hours. Like I was in, I had my interview at the night, and the next morning I left, and I had like very little time. So I remember asking him, over the phone, could I stop by and just check out the space for 5 minutes? And he said, oh, of course, stop by. And I was like, okay, perfect. So I have like 2 hours. I had like a 2-hour window, I remember, to get to the airport. And so I was like, okay, so I can stop by 10, 15 minutes at most, then grab lunch, then make it to the airport. I show up to the diversionary. Of course, as you all said, the first impression of how tall. I mean, I'm 5'4", so I was like so tall. And we ended up having a conversation for about an hour and 50 minutes until I had to get in the cab and get to the airport. It was just this instant connection where I resonate very strongly with Pierre's sentiments that Dan was a friend to everyone he knew, because within the first time of meeting this man, it wasn't like I had an acquaintance in San Diego. It wasn't like I had just met a professional colleague. I had created a friend. And, for anyone who's decided to pick up their lives and move to a whole different state where no one, that can be very scary and very daunting. And I knew at the time when I accepted said, yes, I'm going to go to FCSU, I knew no one. And I guess I can always say that Dan Kirsch was my first friend in San Diego. And I was able to sort of move here and start this new chapter of my life, in part because I knew I had that comfort right from before I even was here. Dan created a place for me before I even had one. So that's sort of my first impression there with Dan. And kind of going sort of on that, we've all worked with him on various, projects, primarily, Dear Harvey. I know a lot of us have that connection with him. Share a situation or a moment or some sort of experience that you had where your interactions with Dan made you a stronger artist or a different artist or something that he did to help your artistic journey as a theater artist. Because like we said, there's going to be lots of celebrations and all that, but this one's just a little specific. This discussion that we're having is a little specific about his impact on us as theater artists. So, Patty, why don't you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, well, first, I love that story. I didn't know that story, Ira, about how you met Dan. But yeah, a friend to everyone. I think, and this sort of goes off, the story that I tell when we were in Kansas, but he commissioned me to do a musical. One of the patrons at Diversionary said, why don't you ever do shows that we can, bring our daughter to? And Dan said, how old is your daughter? And they said, she's 3. And so we started to look around. I was working in the literary office. We started to look around for musicals for gay families, because as we know, to see oneself on stage, to have the sense that to be centered like that gives worth and honors a humanity like nothing else in a public space. And we couldn't find any. And so Dan said, why don't you go to the bookstore and get some books and see if there's one that you want to adapt. And then I did, and I found The Daddy Machine. But what I remember is when I took that to him, I didn't feel like, and he was the artistic director, he was, running this full season, but I didn't feel like, what do you think? Would this one be good? I felt like, I was sort of saying that, but he just sort of, his energy was just like, oh, is that the one you think? Okay, do that one. Like the level of trust and faith in me as an artist let me trust myself. And I think a lot of people in that position, I don't think he had an opportunity to enjoy the power of that position. And I never saw him do that. He was always focused out on the thing, and it gave me confidence in my choice. Yeah.
Awesome. Thomas?
Yeah, I second that 100%. After Dear Harvey, I self-produced a song cycle, which eventually became The Things We Never Say with you. Back then, I think it was called A Room Full of Strangers, but I self-produced it, and Dan came, and it was it was a lot of heart and soul I put into it. I remember afterward, he would kind of say to me, he's like, thank you so much for having me. Let me know when you want to get coffee and we can sit down and talk about it. And I liked that so much, that sort of space, and then coming to Dan. And then, we sat down and talked about it. And he had some criticisms, some great criticisms that I took with going forward that I think we talked about in developing The Things We Never Say, and ideas for the piece. But I was convinced as he was telling me, I'm like, oh, he hated it. And it's not that he hated it. He really enjoyed it and enjoyed my work. But then he goes, so I want you to think about what's in your satchel of art, plays and musicals that you're writing, or a story you want to tell, and come back and let me know. And I had been reading The Picture of Dorian Gray, and I told him that, and he's like, great. And it was my first commission. It was the first time that I had a professional commission, and it came exactly like Patty said. He believed in artists, like, first and foremost. He believed in how artists saw the world, and when he could see that, that's where he gave his energy. He's like, okay. And even though maybe sometimes the piece wasn't something that he enjoyed, or he loved comedies. He loved musical comedies. I know that. I don't write musical comedies. And he still has this belief in the artist and lifting artists up. And I want to take it one step further in that he trusted me, or he took chances on me so often. Chances I would not have taken on myself because I did not believe in myself enough to take those chances. He hired me to music direct a musical. I did not think I was capable of doing that. And then when I moved to New York and didn't have work, he hired me for a musical down in Virginia. And it shook me every time. It always surprised me. And that Dan gave me the confidence that I needed to believe in myself. And I really don't think I'd have that without him.
Beautiful. Jerusha?
Dan encouraged me to live what I believed through my artistic expression. I was in the middle of writing a one-woman show. It was eventually produced by Intermission Productions at Diversionary in that space. But I was very stuck. I was in the middle of it. And I was kind of ready to give up because it didn't make sense. I didn't know quite what was going to happen to it. I didn't feel like this was, you sort of write and you feel like it's going into a black hole somewhere. And I remember he heard me, and he had a wonderful way of not being too, sympathetic with my whining about it. He started singing George Michael's "You Gotta Have Faith" to me, and it was wonderful. It was kind of like this throwdown, like, okay, you person, yeah, don't you, you're the one that's supposed to be all like into this sort of faith stuff. So Annie up, let's do it. Let's write. And who are you to be given up? Who are you to stop risking? Who are you to, and it was playful and loving and wonderful. And then of course he provided, connections in space and mentoring on how to, but I won't forget his sense that there was something at stake in art. There's something really important, and you don't just lay it down, you push it and you finish it. And it doesn't matter if you don't see, where it's going to go. I mean, he lived his whole life. I love that image, Patty, planting seeds. And the seeds matter, even if you don't see the trees. You got to have faith.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Back in the day, with Dear Harvey in particular, I had never taken a show anywhere, except San Diego State at the time. And I was invited by Dan and Patty and Thomas to be a part of the New York Fringe Festival. And I got to spend some time wandering around, the streets, and I was so excited to be a part of that. It really affected me in a great way. I was challenged in different ways as a production manager, and I'll never forget, those opportunities again that you think you don't think earlier, 3 or 4 years earlier, that when you met this man that you'd be going to New York and then hanging out and being invited. He had such an open heart. That you could sleep on his couch and he would, if it was you had no place to stay. And I'll always remember that. I came back as a different production manager. I was able to navigate and learn. I learned so much from him on that particular event. So that's what I have.
Okay. Such good memories from that production. So for me, I will second Thomas's thought of believing in me for jobs that I would not have believed myself for. When I was finishing my master's program, I got hired by Dan to direct a musical at Diversionary. It was a really interesting musical. We had a great cast, but I don't necessarily know if I was the right choice to direct. He really believed in me. I remember having a call with the playwright ahead of time for approval, and Dan kind of coaching me through the call. I got it, and I worked really hard on the piece. And the tech week, first dress rehearsal, one of the writers and the original director came by to watch and to give some notes, and they were awesome and lovely, and it was very exciting for me. It was the first time in my career I'd ever had that connection with the playwright. And basically, in a nutshell, after the Monday night dress rehearsal, we had a very long note session, very long, in the lobby of Diversionary. And the general consensus was, in a nutshell, Act 1 is awesome. Act 2, what the hell just happened? And there were lots of corrections that needed to be made, and big corrections. And it was 4 days before opening. And so I had my first experience of what it's like to have basically a show doctor of sorts, which, for those of you who may be watching not know, is someone who comes in sort of very last minute and helps to implement some big changes that need to be made. And it was the first time that had ever happened to me, and I was really terrified. But it was such a gift to have Dan as the show doctor in that situation, because there was just a level of kindness, a level of respect, a level of understanding through the work that, honestly, it's amazing. I went through that whole experience, and I never once doubted myself as a director, even when faced with this situation that was that I am sure in any other situation, considering, I'm such a type A kind of person, I would have just panicked, and I don't know what would have happened. Dan was just such a calming force, and he really taught me a lot about myself through that, the good, the bad, and just, I think when I look now at the way I operate as an artistic director for my own company and the way I treat directors that come in to work with us, I know for certain that Dan's influence on my life is a direct impact, has had a direct impact on how I treat others moving forward. And so that's something that I definitely learned from Dan and carry with me. We just have a couple more here. What are you going to miss the most about Dan? Who wants to go first on this one? What are you going to miss the most?
Oh, I'll jump in. I'm just going to say the way that he listened. There's a lot of conversation about, the power of listening and its value, and we're all encouraged to do it in ways that are deeply honoring of people. And in my experience, few of us actually have that skill, but Dan did, and I'm going to miss that. Yeah.
Gonna miss his hugs for sure. Gonna miss his sweet tooth for sure. And to second Patty with that, while listening, I always felt like after a conversation with Dan, I'd be different by the end of it. I'd realize something. He'd help me realize something. He was so wise, probably from listening so well.
I really appreciated, and we touched on this, the way he was for you, also for the process, like the process really mattered to him. But the thing that I'll name here, that's just a slightly different part of his life and persona in relation to sort of our family was the way he was for my kids. We lived overseas for a number of years, and we were living in a remote sort of area of the South Pacific, and there was not a lot of theater or, you know, performance art there in ways that we were used to. And he sent my daughter, who loves musical theater, the complete boxed set of Rodgers and Hammerstein's musicals, like across the ocean, this big thing, you know, I mean, there are however many CDs that is, and just fed her. My son too, playing board games together. I mean, he just, he saw them. And when my daughter came out, she knew she had an ally in Dan.
I'm going to miss his passion and his smile again whenever you had this conversation about creative endeavors and things that you wanted to do and goals. He was always very passionate about trying to be as helpful as possible. And I'm going to miss that passion that you see when you meet such a special human being.
Yeah, I would say that smile. The last time I saw Dan was, as mentioned in the film, was when he came to surprise Thomas and I, The Things We Never Say at BWT back in 2015. And I remember sort of waiting outside the door and seeing Patty and him walking from a distance. And I remember seeing his smile first, even though he was really far away. That smile could just light up a room or an outdoor space. I mean, it just could be seen from a mile away. And I'll miss that. The hugs and the unconditional love. Last question here. If you could say something directly to Dan today, what would you say to him?
Well, where are you? I love you. We're still doing it. I would tell him we're still doing it. I think he would like what you did with Pierre in that film, Ira, because
Yeah, it was beautiful.
I mean, you know, he was trying to do, you know, he worked with all of us, but there was a way in which he was working by himself for something that he could see. And I'm not sure what I mean by that, but there was so much in him that I didn't see or whatever. But and I don't know that he believed that we would get there as a community or as a human family. But I would want to tell him that we got there. I think he saw that the doing it is the thing. Yeah. It's not the result of it. It's not where we're going. It's being right here and doing it. And that's why, you know, if we were young and we were not skilled yet, it didn't matter to him, because doing the thing is the it. And so I would want to tell him that you did do it, Dan. You did do it. Not that he would doubt that he did it, but that is the thing. There's only this right here, and he did it with all of us, and he did it in a way that it's still as strong as when he was here and stronger. And I saw that from your film too. Like it's just going to keep rising because it's a true thing, and it comes, you know, from our hearts. And so, and I would tell him, and I don't know if I told him this or not, but that I wouldn't be who I am without him. I wouldn't be as whole or have experienced many healings that I did with working on Dear Harvey without him. But I would tell him, thanks for being my family. He was in our wedding, which I think sometimes would not be his top 10 things to do, like to be in a wedding, because he was not a bring focus to himself person. But anyway, I would just say, I love you, Dan. Thanks.
Yeah. I would say mission accomplished. I that what you did with Pierre is, Dan, like, is now, he's part of that legacy. He and Dear Harvey was such a big part of continuing Harvey Milk's legacy, and Dan did that. Dan, I would say, I'm sorry I didn't answer the phone as much. I would say that. There's a lot I'd want to say that I probably won't say here, but to echo that, I am, he's an imprint on my life, and thank you for that. It's a fabulous imprint, and I promise that I will do that too for someone. Like, I will make sure that that Dad's spirit will, that imprint will go to good work.
I want to say thank you, Dan, for claiming us as part of your family. It meant a great deal to us. And you showed up for us. And there aren't a lot of people that do that weave community the way you do it. And it mattered for us. I think, too, we're living in a time when hope and the finish line feels elusive and far away. And I would want to tell Dan, your modeling of how the ordinary daily work of the small thing, the small right thing, the building of connection, the paying attention to the person in front of you, the showing love in concrete ways that matter to the person that maybe isn't the most important in the room, that stuff is what's giving me hope right now. That's showing me the way through this really difficult time in our country. That the big flashy things feel very far away, but your witness of showing up and showing care and love and building community right here, right now, in the plot of earth you tend, that's feeding me. It's keeping me going. Thank you.
And I would, I too would express gratitude. That's what I have a lot of for Dan. Every time I saw him, like I said, I came out a better person, a more passionate to do my work after every conversation. So besides saying thank you, I would ask him, can you please help humanity from where you are, Dan? Because we're in an interesting, really, we need your help, buddy. So look down upon us and help humanity, please.
I don't think I ever expressed to Dan what he meant to me while he was here. And sort of like Tom has things we never say, those are certainly regrets that I have. And I hope that if he was here today, I would make sure he knew how much I loved him and how grateful I was for his impact on my life. I have a tattoo that is a memorial tattoo that has different stars on it to represent people in my life. And then when those people passed, their star gets kind of a little different tribute to it. And over the last couple of weeks, I've made the decision to add a star for Dan in my tattoo that'll sit next to the star next to Harvey Milk. And I just want him to know that there's a the last couple of months, there's felt like there's just a little less light in the world. He has brought such light and love and joy to so many, more than I know, more than any of us know. And I hope now that from wherever he is, I hope he sees that. I hope he sees all of this love that we're sending his way. And yeah, I would just tell him I love him. I want to thank all of you so much for participating in this. That was a tough last question. I was trying to think about how to end this little bit, and it came up with there's just a little 45-second video that I'm going to play. At the end, there'll be a chance for a little moment of silence for us all to reflect. But I was like having like the hardest time trying to put together the video and like, what do I do? Like what song and all this. And I knew that this last question was going to be difficult and all things. So what I encourage everyone to do at this moment is we're going to do a little dance for Dan. And so wherever you are, I want you to do that. The music I ended up selecting is one that was actually in the movie. You might not have heard it as much because it was definitely an underscore of the movie, and it was not much. However, it was a disco song that was written by Thomas Hodges. As we were doing this process, I told him the last song that he submitted to me was this disco song. I kept pushing for him because, in the story he says how he was trying to get this disco song for Dan, and it wasn't working. And I kept pushing him to do it, and I was like, do it, and he did, and it's wonderful and it's fabulous. So we're gonna look at these pictures. If you watch the film, you already saw most of these pictures already. But we're gonna have a little disco song to Dan and send some love his way. Thank you all so much, and this one's for Dan.